The Hard Shoulder on Newstalk.
With Nissan Subscribe and Drive. No deposit, no compromise, no fuss. Find out more at nissan.ie.
The news headlines: a record-breaking number of people registering for COVID tests today. The HSE saying over 21,000 tests had been booked as of 1 p.m. Despite that, apparently, NPHET is looking to ramp down the testing system, they say, as COVID becomes endemic. Well, Paul Moyna is Professor of Immunology and Director of the Kathleen Lonsdale Institute for Human Health Research at NUI Maynooth. Paul, you're very welcome to the programme, as always. From a public health point of view, can you explain the rationale for this? Why would testing be ramped down?
I think we'll see that, Kieran, over time, and especially as we move from what we've seen sort of in the acute pandemic phase to one where we move to the endemic phase. So this is where the virus will persist and probably persist indefinitely. We get to the situation there where it will be circulating at a background rate, but the protection that the vaccines have given us, that will protect most people who've been infected by the virus from getting very seriously ill. So we're moving from one where we're using testing for sort of a public health function to one more in terms of clinical diagnosis and clinical management. I think we probably have to be careful in terms of when this is introduced, Kieran. The reason why I say that is because, in my view, there's still some uncertainty and risks with respect to things that we're not so sure about. So these include, for example, we haven't really experienced the Delta variant in the winter as of yet, over the winter months. We haven't experienced Delta in schools and when schools have been opened. And then thirdly, potentially more worryingly, breakthrough infections. We've seen, for example, in countries like Israel. Israel was very quick in terms of rolling out its vaccination program. And what we've seen there is we've seen peaks of infections a number of months after the second dose, especially the Pfizer dose. And so I'll be watching out to see if we also see that peak a number of months after the second dose. So I think absolutely we will move towards that phase. But in terms of the timing of that, I think there probably needs to be some care attached to that timing.
Well, when we do get to that point, and we might talk about when that would be in just a moment, but when we do get to it, why would you do it? Tony Holohan, in a press release about a week ago, used a really interesting turn of phrase. He talked about getting to a point with testing where the negative consequences outweigh the benefits. I mean, what would be the negative consequences of testing? Is it not better to know these things than not know them?
I think in terms of it is better, and I think it's really important, irrespective of timing, that we have a good surveillance system in place, not only in terms of new outbreaks, but potentially in terms of the arrival of new variants. So it certainly wouldn't be a good idea if we just completely shut down the surveillance system. But we could get to situations, Kieran, where we're looking at, diagnosing positive confirmed cases, and then introducing restrictions, for example, on close contacts. And they are close contacts who've been vaccinated and are probably protected from serious illness. So we will get eventually, and I think, in the not too distant future, where it will become endemic. And because of the vaccines and the success of the vaccination rollout, most of us are protected. Now, unfortunately, some people, despite being vaccinated, will continue to get very seriously ill, and there will be some deaths. But fortunately, they'll be relatively low relative to the numbers that we've seen previously.
The other thing that NPHET has been asked to consider is whether we should change the rules around close contacts in schools. That, short of winding down testing, while we are still doing that high level of testing and that there is a high level of community transmission, still that an awful lot of children will continue to be sent home from school, and that's not ideal.
Yeah,
would that be wise, I suppose, is the question I'm asking.
I think there are other ways to achieve the same goal. So close contacts, if children are being asked to stay away from school and deprived of school, and yet we have technology. So, for example, I would propose in situations like that, if a child is a close contact of a confirmed case, just give the parents of that child, a packet of rapid antigen tests. And these are self-testing now. And again, test the child each morning. It can be done very, very quickly, a matter of a couple of minutes before the child brushes his or her teeth.
They don't like antigen testing, though.
They don't like antigen testing, but the question has to be asked here, really, in terms of, we heard last week with respect to close contacts and confirmed cases, public getting in contact with schools for 3 to 4 days. It that we're leaving any defence. What there is,
I tell you what, we just have a little issue with the line there, Paul. What we'll do is we'll get you on a better line there for just a moment. And while we're getting you on a better line, I'm just going to remind everybody again about our Go an Extra Mile campaign, which we launched here last week on News Talk. We are trying to fundraise for Ireland's National Children's Hospitals through the Children's Health Foundation. So they raise money for Crumlin and Temple Street and Tala and the paediatric unit, and kind of really, really worthy cause. And we want you to go to newstalk.com/go an extra mile. Basically, you can do what you want. You can set your own target, but we're running a 5k here in News Talk and on the Hard Shoulder the first weekend in October, and we want as many of you to take part as possible, and we want you to raise as much money as you can. So newstalk.com/go an extra mile. Paul, I think we have you on a better line there. We just we lost you kind of momentarily towards the end when you were talking about antigen tests. I do want to ask you about another development today, and it's this report in The Lancet that suggests booster vaccines may not be needed for the general population. Now, we also had confirmation today that we are going to roll out booster vaccines for some of the population here. We're doing it off-label, which means that we're doing it without recommendation from the European Medicines Agency. Are we right to roll out a booster programme?
I think probably in very selective cases. So I think it's going to be restricted to nursing home residents and older people, and it's going to be used as, say, off-label. I don't think, and as the Lancet article has indicated, that there probably is justification in terms of rolling it out more widely. The big protection that the booster will give you is it will cause your immune system to produce antibodies, and it will definitely probably give you more protection against getting infected. But the important thing is the double dose of vaccines that we've at the moment, they're protecting us really, really well against serious illness. So there probably isn't a need for rollout across the entire population, probably in selected cases. Now, there will be another paper hearing coming out later this week, data from Israel, because they've adopted a more widespread rollout of the boosters, and they're suggesting that actually the boosters do protect against serious illness. So it'll be interesting to look at that data as well. So there's a little bit of confusion around there in terms of the effectiveness of the booster, and does it only serve to prevent infection, or does it also serve in terms of protecting against serious illness?
Yeah, of course, there's the moral quandary as well about offering boosters to people in the developed world, while so much of the underdeveloped world, or the developing world, we should say.
I think that's really important here. And like in a situation where we have limited vaccines, if there's an available vaccine, that's no doubt the person who hasn't been vaccinated, that's the most effective way to use that vaccine.
Paul Moynagh, Professor of Immunology and Director of the Kathleen Lonsdale Institute for Human Health Research at NUI Maynooth. Paul, thanks a million for joining us here on The Hard Shoulder.